What's going on, everyone? Anthony from Chronometer Check here, and today we're taking a look at the grand, the beautiful Seiko 5 Sports GMT. Let's unbox this bad boy and take a closer look. So here it is. As you can see, this is the SSK003, aka the Blueberry, with a particularly unique blue, somewhat sunburst dial that actually almost looks black in person. I would say probably partially because of the lighting, but in general is just much darker than it is vibrant. And obviously one of the stars of the show is the fact that it is an affordable automatic GMT complication, which pretty much is in a class of its own in terms of specifications. I mean, there really is no other reputable GMT, automatic GMT, for this price range. And this does come in at about $475 US. As a longtime owner and lover of watches like the SKX, I mean, this has been with me pretty much since I started watch collecting, and then later on the Seiko 5 Sports Divers. Don't love this one quite as much. Actually, I could probably sell this one and it wouldn't really bother me, but definitely a big lover of the SKX, and this, in a lot of ways, is kind of an embodiment of that, but of course kicks it up a notch with the GMT complication and also quite a unique look. Hand winding feels exactly like it does on the Seiko 5 Sports Divers. This one using the new Seiko 4R34, a brand new movement designed for this watch. So it will be interesting to see when I believe Seiko will likely sell this as the NH34, as they do with 4R series movements, etc. They sell it as the NH35, NH36 to many, many micro brands, creating an accessible gateway for this very, very reliable yet affordable automatic movement. So that means that many micro brands can use the movement quite affordably. So it's very likely that this watch is going to be a kind of revolution in terms of setting the pace and setting the trend for future affordable automatic GMT watches to come. I think this watch truly is a revolution, and just, kudos to Seiko for constantly pushing the barriers of what is possible at different price points, and not just for their own brand, but by selling that movement to other manufacturers, they really open up a lot of possibilities for people, especially in the affordable range, to be able to experience different types of watches they would never have been able to before. But in terms of dimensions, pretty much almost identical, except the SSK GMT variant is just, I think, 0.3 millimeters thicker, specifically due to that slightly thicker GMT movement, but that's actually quite impressive. I mean, for such another complication that makes the movement thicker and also adds an extra hand stacked on top, it's actually quite impressive. It's only 0.3 millimeters thicker, and I don't even think we're even gonna notice that on the wrist. So taking a look at the specs, this watch comes in at 42.5 millimeters in diameter, just like the Seiko SKX, with 100 meters of water resistance, a stainless steel case, obviously a Hardlex crystal with a date and a date magnification cyclops. Some people are absolutely going to hate that. Uses the brand new Seiko 4R34 movement that beats at 21,600 beats per hour and approximately a 41-hour power reserve. It also does come on this Jubilee bracelet that is said to be a little bit more beefed up, a little bit more solid than the jingly jangly Seiko SKX bracelet, which is quite lightweight, and just right off the bat, I truly can feel the difference in weight and kind of just solidness between the two bracelets. I'm sure part of the weight difference is likely due to the movement, but in terms of the bracelet itself, I can feel a little bit more of kind of a solid nature, and you could even see in the flex here. The SKX bracelet just wants to flex a lot more. Might be because I've worn this one quite a lot. I mean, this is, a staple in my collection, and I've worn this thing, I guess you could say, as my beater. So I've worn the heck out of this thing, and it's definitely, lived to tell the tale. And that blue at the bottom of the bezel, similar to the dial, almost looks black in lighting conditions where it's not super well lit, but once the light hits it perfectly, you do see that blue start to open up a little bit. So really, really like this colorway. There are two others. There's a SSK001, a black and gray, and the SSK005, which is an orange and black, a little bit more pop, a little bit more standout. I actually am planning on traveling with this watch. I literally am going away next week. So perfect timing. I'll be going away for just over a week. So this will give me the perfect opportunity to, use this watch, wear this watch, and obviously put the GMT complication in the watch itself to the test. The bezel itself is friction based, but actually does feel quite substantial in that I don't think you're gonna just knock it out of place, like even just like bumping against it isn't really gonna bother it too much. So I think it's kind of gonna be able to set it, and it should be able to stay into place relatively nicely. So it feels really good, bi-directional, friction based, no clicks, but really, really good job there. Now the GMT hand itself is actually activated by pulling out the crown, not a screw down crown by the way, only 100 meters of water resistance, unlike the SKX, but more similar to the Seiko 5 Sports Diver's watch, also 100 meters of water resistance, no screw down crown again. So pulling the crown out one click allows you to independently rotate the GMT hand on every hour only, so you can't independently set it between the hours that it's fixed to. However, pulling the crown out 2 clicks does allow you to set the time normally, and you can see the GMT hand sweeping with it, and you set the GMT hand the amount or the difference in time between the time that you have set on the local time and then the GMT hand time. And something about the 4R34 movement, as you can see over here at 3 o'clock, it only has a date, which is kind of nice because most watches that use the 4R35 or 4R36 with the 4R36 have a day date, and that's, you know, most of Seiko's divers or dive style watches with this. So just a little bit more to set, and honestly I find the date quite useful, but the day not quite as useful, because typically I tend to know what day of the week it is, although a little bit easier to forget what date of the month it is. And that is highlighted by this brand new Cyclops, which honestly I'm not really a huge fan of. Mostly not necessarily because of the Cyclops itself, but because the magnification isn't really that good. And that's kind of like one of I guess a giveaway of a cheap watch. Good watches will use a crystal that have quite a lot of magnification to really be able to read the date quite easily, but this watch, as you can see, doesn't really magnify it too much, so it's almost like, what is it doing? It's almost in a way more for aesthetic or more trying to play the part rather than actually serving a functional purpose. So taking a look at the Jubilee bracelet that it comes on, again, it's very similar, obviously, in design to the Jubilee bracelet that came on the SKX, and one of the reasons that it's just so awesome, but slightly different in terms of actual build. Now, the clasp itself is quite similar, so just a stand clasp, nothing really too impressive, but honestly was decent, and like I said, I've worn this thing a ton, and it's just held up perfectly fine, not a problem whatsoever. Feels quite secure, locks into place, etc. But the actual links itself is where I definitely feel quite an improvement. So there's the hollow end links of the SKX, and then here are the more solid end links of the SSK001. So a bit of a more premium package overall, and a little bit more of a, you know, you kind of get what you pay for, because this is a slightly more expensive watch at almost $500. Another thing I actually noticed about the clasp itself, it actually does have a push button, whereas the the SKX bracelet was just a friction base where you just had to pry it out with your thumb, but this one does have a push button, again, stamped, so not the greatest, but definitely not bad by any means. So why don't I go ahead and size this up, throw it on the wrist, and see how it wears. All right, just size it up on the bracelet, but before we throw it on the wrist, quick wrist check. Today I'm wearing my Seiko Presage Cocktail Time with Power Reserve. Has a cool date subdial. Really like this thing, beautiful watch. Threw it on a nice casual Perlon strap to keep it nice and cool, both pun intended. And I think it really, really works. Links in the description down below. So here's the SSK003 on my 6.5-inch wrist. As you can see, it wears really, really nicely, just like the SKX did. A little bit of bulk thanks to its 42.5mm diameter, but it has a relatively condensed lug to lug, so it can fit on quite a variety of wrists. And you can see it is a little bit chunky, but not overly so, especially for a dive style watch. And a lot of that is made up due to the bezel itself, as opposed to the actual watch. And you can see the bracelet on here actually looks so nice. I think the bracelet combined with the slightly sportier attire of the GMT model, I mean, I think it just works absolutely perfectly. Just like obviously like the Rolex Batman, obviously they use a Jubilee on their watch, and you know, for good reason. I think this slight pop of bling really works on such a versatile, kind of sporty, everyday, travel-y watch that is versatile and has a little bit of bling to keep things interesting, but is also not so overly flashy that just, you know, smacks you in the face with like a bunch of gaudy different design elements. I think it just really, really works. And like I was speculating earlier, it actually does feel a lot more substantial on the wrist in terms of the bracelet. It doesn't have as much like wobble, as much jingle jangle as opposed to this watch. Even, you know, on the wrist, I definitely notice a difference. You could just see how much that kind of flops around. This one, a little bit of a hair puller, just a little bit, but now that it's sized up properly, it's not really too bad. And speaking of sizing, it was absolutely a breeze. It did only have push pins, unfortunately, as did the SKX bracelet. So no screws, but honestly, it is a much, much better bracelet, and sizing it was very, very easy. I had no problems with the push pins whatsoever. So So a little bit of a lume comparison. As you can see, the lume on this thing is absolutely phenomenal. Using my handy dandy lume flashlight, by the way, has a couple of different modes, and yep, so you just shine it on, you watch for quite a few seconds, lights it up much than you know, your phone flashlight or just a regular flashlight does, so you can really get a good shot. This thing is super bright compared to the SKX, which is even, you know, also has amazing lume, and you know, this one definitely stands up to it. I think it's might be even better. Possibly this might be a slightly older watch. I've had this for I think 4 years now, and who knows how long the stock has been sitting around, so the lume might be a little bit faded, but I could tell you for a fact the lume here is excellent, like fantastic. So all in all, the new Seiko 5 Sports GMT is an absolute hit in my book. Not only is it a fantastic looking watch that obviously has a GMT complication, making it awesome in itself, it's quite affordable, and I'm quite impressed and excited for what an affordable movement, an affordable GMT movement that Seiko is now going to be able to sell to third parties. You know, I'm excited to see what that's going to do for microbands and for the watch industry, especially in the affordable range. And you know that that's kind of one of the, you know, my favorite of my collection, and just, you know, kind of what this channel is based a lot about. I really like to focus on the watches that are, you know, not just cheap for the sake of being cheap, but are still a very good value. Watches that are good but not expensive, and that's exactly what I think this is. I'm really excited to be able to put this to its test when I go on my trip next week, so I'll wear it and then come back and give you guys a full, so stay tuned for that. Don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time here, and to be informed when that video is released. If you did enjoy this video, I would appreciate if you could drop a like, and check out the link to this watch when it's available in the description below, as well as the other watches discussed in this video. Thanks for watching. Till next time.